Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Peter Jennings, and I go by CSURAM88 across the daily fantasy industry. And I'm excited to be back again here at FantasyLabs doing another lineup review. Starting off, as always, with the Three Donkeys League with Levitan, Bales, and I. I was fortunate enough to take this down. Had a polarizing week in DraftKings cash games. Had this lineup, which did very well, and had a really bad lineup, which was in the four-man for the DFS Edge. And really what it came down to was one team had Julio and one team did not. He had an eruption week, and if you wanted to have success in any format, you needed Julio Jones. So taking a look at my lineup specifically, I stacked up the Falcons with Matt Ryan, Tevin Coleman, and Julio Jones. And, that was a pretty standard play across the board. You look at the ownership on those guys, with the exception of Matt Ryan. Quarterbacks obviously are always distributed, and there are chalkier options than him. But Matt Ryan ended up having a decent game. It's unfortunate that one of the long touchdowns to Julio Jones was thrown by Mohamed Sanu for Matt Ryan owners. But yeah, I feel good about the process there. Great spot at home. The offense is clicking going against this Tampa Bay defense, which you've seen give up a ton of fantasy goodness to all positions. Kareem Hunt was the huge bust that I had too much exposure to in Week 12. I don't know what to say about this Kansas City offense at this point. It was a great spot where they're huge favorites. Buffalo, since trading Marcel Darius, has been getting shredded by the run. Just seemed like a great spot for Kansas City's offense and for Kareem Hunt to get back on track. Did not come to fruition. Massive bust for his price tag. Corey Davis was the receiver that was 100% owned here in this spot. With Rashard Matthews out, everyone was on Corey Davis. Made sense. Kind of a weird game for Tennessee. They really ran the ball a lot, which is the makeup of that team. But you figured against the Colts, there'd be a lot of opportunity for Corey Davis. Delaney Walker did have a good game, who I had exposure to, and was a pretty chalky play overall around the industry. Talked about Julio already. Then Cooper Kupp, who was mega chalk. We'll look into him more. He made a ton of sense with Robert Woods out, his price tag going against New Orleans, who had multiple cornerbacks out. He was very chalky, and he had a great game. Could have had an even bigger game potentially, but 8 catches, 116 yards, get the bonus. Scored really well in DraftKings. Doyle almost got to that 100-yard bonus, which would have changed the dynamic for him. Still a good week. Tight ends across the board did well. Gronk, Delaney Walker, Doyle. The only tight end that busted was Kelsey, and that was just disappointing across the board with Kansas City's offense. And then I went J.D. McKissick here. I kind of went back and forth with McKissick and Devontae Booker at that $3,700 price tag, and decided to go McKissick in this lineup. Could have had a nice game. Not a ton of opportunity. They're still giving Eddie Lacy a lot of looks. So going forward, we kind of know what to expect with McKissick. I was hoping that it was kind of the last straw with Mike Davis going down, but this is Russ Wilson's team, which we already knew, and the running backs are really going to struggle to contribute. I do think McKissick offers upside with his pass catching, which is why I didn't mind him at his price tag of $3,700. And then I had the Panthers defense, got fortunate with a late touchdown there, but the Panthers were a defense I thought made a lot of sense because of the pressure they'd be able to get on the quarterback. Shootout here, you see that they gave up 27 points and still got 17 fantasy points, and that puts an emphasis on turnovers and sacks, which is how you can really attack predicting defensive production. So that was my three-man team in the Thunderdome, $7,500 Thunderdome, $500K. Basically broke even, I think, exactly on this contest, considering I got 15,000 back on 2 entries. So not the worst result, especially when you compare it to my other tournament results this last week. The team that I had that did well was a great team that just busted at running back. James White, I was really heavy on. Thought that he had a good opportunity against these Miami linebackers, and you're playing with fire, and that was just a bad break with James White. Certainly, you could question the decision making when you're taking any Patriots running back, but James White did not have a good week. Deion Lewis and Burkhead did do well. Kareem Hunt, again, was the other bust here, but the rest of the lineup did well. I was fortunate with the Sanu Julio Jones stack. Who know that would ever have positive correlation, but the fact that it did was amazing. Delaney Walker ran it back with Deshaun Jackson, Cooper Kupp, and the Patriots defense here. So like the thought process overall, the James White was the thinnest pick by far for sure. You had to take a risk on some running backs. In hindsight, would have been nice to fit Mixon in. Kareem Hunt, I was just really heavy on, and it burned me bad. This team was really bad. Ended up having to pivot after the morning games to some different plays, but overall, really, really rough lineup. Kareem Hunt again and Coleman, who are pretty much chalk for me. And then I had Corey Davis, LaFell, Michael Thomas. Receivers I liked across the board that all busted. Had to move to Jared Cook. He had a touchdown return. Didn't matter for this lineup. This is just an awful, awful team. But Cooper Kupp and the Falcons defense who were chalky and let people down. So, it's hard to evaluate this lineup because I had to make some pivots due to just starting off so poorly with Kareem Hunt essentially and Corey Davis as well as LaFell that, it just wasn't a good spot overall. I think that in general, one thing I absolutely need to improve on is late swapping. Some of the guys are really, really good at it. And that's certainly a leak in my DFS game that I need to get better at. So I'm trying to do that and made some pivots here. And, it's easy to be results-oriented and say it was awful. But, I think that in general, that's an area of improvement. And it's hard to kind of gauge how effective I was at it in this particular spot. So break even there. And then we go to the contest that I did very poorly in, which is the $750 1.5 mega 75th special. Best team was another Matt Ryan stack here. Still had James White, which was a huge bust, but the rest of the team did pretty well. Michael Thomas obviously didn't have a great game, but a lot of the players that we've already covered. That was my best team. You can see here I only had 2 teams that cashed out of quite a few, so it was not a good performance. My worst team was a Paxton Lynch kind of game stack for that Denver-Oakland game, which I knew would be contrarian. I was planning on actually having a little bit more exposure to this, but there was win there, so got off of it. The rest of the team is just really, really marginal across the board. Eagles defense being the only bright spot, but a lot of just death, and you can see Kareem Hunt and James White were 2 devastating calls for me. So if we look in the contest dashboard here, which I think is one of the coolest features, honestly, at FantasyLabs, something I'm looking at more as I try to get better at tournaments. There's some great tournament players out there to pay attention to, and I'm trying to get better. So my particular teams here, you can see for that contest we were just looking at that I did poorly in, you can see my most leveraged players. And of course, across the board, these guys busted. And these went against kind of the cash game builds I had, trying to be contrarian here, with the exception with some value plays. But James White was obviously the big bust, and really didn't get into too many guys. And the funny thing is, I had so much Julio and cash across the industry that I ended up having a decent week. But in tournaments, I did pretty poorly. So that's one of the tough challenges that I'm always trying to improve upon, is basically getting better at mixing in these contrarian leverage plays with still some of the highest equity plays. And that's obviously the challenge of GPPs. And my favorite aspect of this particular tool here at FantasyLabs is looking through guys that you consistently see at the top of the leaderboard. So you could look at Chipotle Addict and Papa Gates and see their leverage on certain players. You could look at Udako, who's obviously done really, really well. You can see all the leverage that he had on Julio Jones. So this is something that I think is really important to look at, and a great way to try to get better at DFS is evaluating how successful players are doing it. So I'm trying to get better. Not my best effort this week, but I am definitely happy with the process of attacking these GPPs. And it was overall a pretty good cash game week. DraftKings, again, was polarizing, but overall across the industry had a lot of Julio Jones, which worked out really well this week, and hopefully you guys did too. He's a huge, he's Levitan's guy, and we finally got that eruption spot. So hope the week went well for you. Tried to implement the contest dashboard, which I'm going to do a lot more of going forward. And if you have any other feedback for me, definitely hit me up on Twitter at CSURAM88, and I will look to implement that going forward. So again, hope this was helpful for you guys. You can learn from some of my mistakes, and we'll look forward to hopefully doing well in week 13 and for a review then. Good luck this week, guys.